here. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll get started on chapter 8 of the book of Ecclesiastes. We will finish this morning. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll begin. Lord, thank you so much for just the opportunity for us to be here and to study your word, your texts, and may this be profitable and instructive for us, and may you be glorified as we seek to understand what Solomon, that is Koheleth, wanted to teach and instruct those whom he was writing to and us to know. We thank you again so much for who you are and for what you do. For it's in your son's name. Amen. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Again, there's not really, chapter 8 is pretty easy if you just read it straight through for us to know. However, there are some interesting things about this particular chapter that I kind of want to focus on and study as we go through this discourse. So let's talk about what we reviewed last week, and then we'll jump into what we're doing this week. Koheleth begins the chapter of chapter 8 of asking who is like the wise man and who knows the explanation of a word given. This underscores essentially that no person is like the wise man who uses wisdom, and that a person who uses wisdom knows how to address or explain a word given, especially within the context of those who are in authority. Koheleth then continues in chapter 8, giving the benefit of wisdom that it brightens a person's face, it lifts a person's countenance, and causes, again, their strong face to change or to beam, right? When individuals have information that was not available to them previously, specifically wisdom, and they ascertain wisdom, that actually changes the countenance, that changes their face. Then Koheleth continues and talks about the suppression or the rejection of righteousness and a righteous example in Jerusalem. He says this in chapter 8, essentially verses 7 and following. I'll go ahead and read some of it. If though a man's trouble is heavy upon him, if no one knows what will happen, who can tell him when it will happen? No man has authority to restrain the wind with the wind, or authority over the day of death, and there's no discharge in the time of war, and evil will not deliver those who practice it. All this I have seen and applied my mind to every deed that has been done under the sun, wherein man has exceeded authority over another to his own hurt. Verse 10, so then I've seen the wicked buried, those who go in and out from the holy place, and they are soon forgotten in the city where they did thus. Right? Koheleth uses the example of the holy place or Jerusalem to explain this concept. And also that the promotion or advocacy of evil deeds among humanity. That when evil reigns, righteousness is suppressed. People forget or ignore righteousness and promote wicked deeds when wicked people rule. All right. Koheleth discusses wisdom in light of authority of the time, that when a subject is before a king, they ought to conduct themselves before them with wisdom. However, when those who are in authority do not govern in wisdom, those who promote righteousness suffer and are forgotten because of the promotion of evil among human beings, again, due to a lack of swift punishment. And I equated this, how many times have we seen this even in our own culture, right? Where punishment is not dealt with swiftly, and as a result of it, wickedness grows and fosters. And as a result of it, the righteousness are crushed. Now, I ended with that last week, right? That didn't seem like a good place to end. Hey, you're going to get crushed. Goodbye. Have a nice life, right? But Koheleth in verse 12 tells us the outcome. Even though in a wicked world or where a king rules with wickedness, the righteousness are forgotten, it is not all lost with the righteous. In chapter 8, verse 12, Koheleth writes this as we continue in our discourse. He goes, although a sinner does 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear him openly. This is amazing. I want to give a couple of just notations of this particular statement. Koheleth gives the answer to the previous statement, right? That when the wickedness rule, the righteous are crushed and are forgotten. However, although a sinner, now remember from the previous standpoint that a sinner is a positional thing from the side of God. He's not talking about everybody, okay? So the word Koheleth uses the word sinner to talk about a particular type of person. So even though a sinner may have an extended physical life that they do evil 100 times, right? Well exceeding beyond that, and may lengthen their life. We talked about this, right? How many times have we seen a person who deserves to die short, like a dictator or tyrannical ruler, and somehow they seem to live longer than everybody, right? Koheleth says that even though a sinner does 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know it will be well. This word well is the word thob. It is qualitatively better for those who fear or revere God, who fear him openly. The word openly is the word panim, that is, again, to the face, okay? So Koheleth underscores that even though a sinner, that is one who does not fear God, does evil 100 times and his physical life may be extended, still Koheleth makes a definitive statement with this phrase, still I know it will be good qualitatively for those who fear God. He underscores this point once more in the next statement in verse 13. But it will not be well for the evil man, and he will not lengthen his days like a shadow, because he does not fear God. Now, what's going on here? He just said that for it may not, but it may not be. Even though an evil man may lengthen his life, right? It will still go well for the righteous or for those who fear God. But now he's saying, but it will not be well for the evil man, and he will not lengthen his days like a shadow. What does this mean? Koheleth states in this statement here in verse 13 that it will not be qualitatively good or thob for the evil man. By the way, this is the same word that is used in verse 10. Remember, I told you that this word evil man was a qualitative term. Well, we just underscored this here in verse 10. So then I have seen the wicked buried. That's the same word here. Okay, so it will not be well for the wicked, the evil man, and he will not lengthen his physical life. This is kind of cool. From our perspective, from when we look at these individuals and see them, in comparison to the righteous, their life is extended. Okay? It's not like they can extend their life. They don't have the power to do that. But from the perspective of those who are righteous, their life seems to be extended, right? However, that person's days will not be lengthened like a person's shadow throughout the day. At the end of the day, their life will not endure. Why? Because they do not fear or honor God. It is all about perspective, is it not? We see evil rise and we think, who's going to solve this? Or we see the wicked, the righteous crushed, and we think, man, their time was short compared to the person who lived longer. We might even question justice as a result of it. Koheleth's main point is this. There are these two statements that Koheleth makes in conjunction with the statements that he previously made in this chapter are as follows. Koheleth seems to suggest that the wicked, that is sinners, don't seem to get justice at all. They do whatever they want. In fact, it seems the worse that they get, the longer they live. That doesn't seem to be a proper equation. And the righteous, those who fear God, are rejected and despised. But Koheleth, instructing by wisdom, that is the wisdom that he has, the wisdom that God has given him, told the congregation of Israel, and I'm convinced us as we read this and examine it, that it will go well for those who fear God. They are not forgotten by God, even though the world may forget them and crush them. In fact, this point is highlighted through the scriptures. Let's take a detour to Psalm. That is Psalm 73. I'm going to read a large portion of this, and I want us to think about this perspective of the Psalter and what Koheleth writes here. He seems to be underscoring something important. I'll start at verse 1. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. Think about the righteous here. But as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. My steps had almost slipped. For I was envious of the arrogant, as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no pains in their death, and their body is fat. They are not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like mankind. Therefore, pride is their necklace. The garment of violence covers them. Their imaginations of their heart run riot. They mock and wickedly speak of oppression. They speak from on high or exalted places. They have set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue parades through the earth. This is the sinner, right? The wicked one. Therefore, his people return to his place, and the abundance are drunk by them. They say, how does God know? And is there knowledge with the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked. This word here is the same word that's used of Koheleth in chapter 8 to describe wicked men. And always at ease. They have increased in wealth. They've increased in wealth. Surely in vain I've kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence, for I've been stricken all day long and chastened every morning. This is what the person who the Psalter is thinking when he sees all of these people, right? Why am I suffering and these people are causing me to suffer and they're living longer than I am, right? This doesn't seem fair. Until we get to verse 15 and following. If I had said I will speak thus, behold, I would have betrayed the generation of your children. When I pondered to understand this, it was troublesome in my sight until I came into the sanctuary of God. Then I perceived their end. Surely you set them in slippery places. You've cast them down to destruction, how they are destroyed in a moment, and they are utterly swept away by sudden terrors. Like a dream when one awakes, Lord, O Lord, when aroused, you will despise their form. It is all about perspective, my brothers and sisters. It is all about outlook. We think that the righteous reign, and they don't. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 7, Koheleth mentions this too. Do not let your speech cause you to sin, and do not say in the presence of the messenger, that is the priests of God, that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry on account of your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For in many dreams and in many words there's emptiness. Rather, fear God. Koheleth continues in chapter 8, verse 14, basically concerning this point. There is futility which is done on the earth. That is, there are righteous men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. On the other hand, there are evil men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. This too is futility. Let's take a look at this word translated in English, happens. Okay, to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. The Hebrew word is nagah. It appears 150 times in the Hebrew scriptures. 3 times in the book of Ecclesiastes it is used, it occurs here. It means either to touch or to reach or to strike something, okay? So to touch something physically, to reach out and grab something, or to strike something, okay? This word is in the Hifil. It is causative, okay? So the result of an action or the cause of something. This Hebrew word is in the participle active, which means this word functions as a noun in this statement. Okay? So, what does this all mean? That it's causative, that it functions as a noun. Why would we translate this word, this Hebrew word nagal, for happens? Well, the Hebrew word in this type is a substantive, which basically emphasizes that what's being said here, that Koheleth is saying, it has a firm standing in reality. It is metaphysical certitude, yes, metaphysical certitude, or plain fact of reality. And if this is a fact, then it is important that we consider it, that we think on it. Koheleth in this statement to the congregation of Israel underscores once more an axiom of futility. That is, what is done on the land, that the righteous are treated as if they are the wicked, or according to the deeds of the wicked. On the other hand, the wicked are treated as if they are righteous. I mean, recall Psalm 73, what we just read, right? Again, Koheleth essentially ends his phrase that these things that occur are useless. They are futility. So we cannot rely on the system of the world and how it works, because it seems to be stacked against the righteous, right? It is of no consequence, of no value, okay? So we cannot put our assurance in the systems of this particular world, in the system, because again, it does not acknowledge those who are righteous. Koheleth continues in chapter 8, verse 15, to talk about, well, what is the outcome? Of course, he mentions that one who fears God, it will work well for them. But how are we to operate here when all this stuff happens and occurs under the sun? Koheleth mentions this. So I commended pleasure, for there is nothing good for a man under the sun except to eat, drink, and be merry. And this will stand by him in his toils throughout the days of his life, which God has given him under the sun. What a fantastic statement. Koheleth is giving us some wisdom here on how to govern ourselves under the sun when this activity occurs. Koheleth, in light of his consideration of this reality, even though we are rejected, even though we are mistreated, even though we are ignored, even though things do not go well here, this is the solution. Koheleth mentioned in light or consideration of this reality that he stated in the previous statement that one may, that he commended or praised pleasure, and that there is nothing qualitatively good, again, there's that word tov again, than to eat, drink, and be merry or satisfied in their personal life. You know, this isn't the first time that Koheleth has said this throughout this discourse. As a matter of fact, if we go back to Ecclesiastes 3, chapter 12 and 13, he says this almost the exact same way. He says, I know that there's nothing better, tov, again, qualitatively good, for them to rejoice. Same word here as the word be merry, to be satisfied, content, and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. It is the gift of God. The labor that one does and the production of eating and drinking that comes from that, this is all a gift from God. It is all a gift from him. Because of this, we ought to be content with our personal life and seek to be intentional, to do good in our lifetime, to not waste our time or our life. He says this again in verse 22. I've seen that nothing is better, that a man, or humanity really, should be simcha, content in his activities, for this is his share or his portion. For who will bring him to see what will occur after him? You don't know what's going to happen in a year. I don't know what's going to happen in a year. So instead of focusing on that, we should be happy for what we have now and be purposeful and intentional today. Again, he underscores the same thing in chapter 5, verse 19. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice, to be content in his labor. This is the gift of God. And I would submit to you that from in 2023, all of us are pretty wealthy. Okay? In comparison to how that culture lived, where most of them were very poor. Here is the reason why Koheleth gives why one should be content. He says, so I commend pleasure, for there's nothing good for a man who under the sun except to eat and drink and be merry, and this will stand with him in his toils. Man, so if you're overwhelmed with life itself, you're looking and watching the news, and you're seeing all of this wickedness go on, right? The best thing to do is turn it off and remember the good things. Why? Koheleth mentions the result of eating and drinking and being content with a person's personal life because these things will continually stand or attend to him in his wearisome labor. That is cool. Okay? Whenever you get tired of life, take a vacation. Wisdom from Koheleth. Friends, companions, husbands, wives, eating, drinking, enjoying your life. That stands with you. You know, we never put adversity in photo albums. We never do that. Why? Because those happy memories get us from one toil to the next. We want to remember those things. Those things are good. Except me, I don't take pictures. I'm not very photogenic. Taking all of this together, all of this information, Koheleth tells the congregation of Israel that the good times in one's life, personal enjoyment of the things that they grandchildren. I don't have them yet, but some of you do, right? Enjoying your grandchildren, enjoying friends, Christmas time, best time, right? Not just because of the food, not just because of the music and things like that, but because of the camaraderie between relationships. Eating, drinking, personal enjoyment are what one ought to focus on, because these things stand with the person when difficult times in one's life comes, particularly when wickedness rises and people forget the righteous. Verse 16 of chapter 8. He says, when I gave my heart to know wisdom and to see the task which has been done on the earth, even though one should never sleep day or night. What in the world does this mean? Does this mean that Koheleth wants us to continually stay up 24/7? Right? Koheleth mentioned that he gave his heart, that is his leb. The heart is not here in the chest. Remember, it is the place of understanding, where the locality of understanding and thinking. So he gave his heart, he gave his mind, his understanding to know wisdom and see. Ra'ah. This is not just looking at something, right? But it's looking at it and inspecting it, right? Testing its qualities, so to speak. So he wants to know wisdom and to inspect the tasks which have been done on the land, right? Pretty straightforward. As mentioned, Koheleth mentioned this intentionality to complete this research study before. He said this in chapter 1. I believe he said this in chapter 3 and in chapter 5. He kind of reminds the reader of the reason why he's doing this particular activity. He's not doing this just because he has nothing to do. He's doing it because he's examining life here under the sun and the activities of humanity. But what does this statement in red by Koheleth mean? Even though one should never sleep day or night. Well, let's take a look at this here. The word sleep is the Hebrew word shenah. Okay, shenah. It appears 23 times in the Hebrew scriptures. 2 times here it occurs in the book of Ecclesiastes, and really the word just means sleep. That's what it means. However, this word can be used in a figurative way, that is metaphorically, or it can be used in a non-figurative way, like you're literally sleeping. Like maybe some of us this morning. That was a joke. Right. Right. In which case, if you were in my class, I would ball up a paper and toss it at you. Okay. It's understood to mean physical sleep, okay, or a person's lackadaisical nature. They are lazy, okay? It's also used like this. Let me give you an example. For instance, in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12, the one other occurrence that this word occurs in, Koheleth uses this quite literally, quite normally. He says this, the sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep, right? So that's literally what he's talking about. When a person works and they labor, they're satisfied with that. That means that their sleep is pleasant, right? This is physical activity here, or lack thereof. However, in Proverbs, Solomon, that is Koheleth, uses this in a different way. This same word here. In Proverbs chapter 6, if you could turn there, verses 6 to 11. Actually, we'll stay there just for a little bit here. In chapter 6, verses 6 to 11, Koheleth, using this same word, Shinah, writes this. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hunter's hand, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise. While having no chief officer or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man. This is not discussing one who just sleeps regularly. This is discussing, using this word, a person who is lazy, right? Who doesn't produce anything but snoring and dribble down their cheeks. Verse 20, or chapter of Proverbs 20, verse 13. Solomon writes this. Do not love sleep, or you will become poor. Open your eyes. That's fascinating to me, because he's writing this to people who are reading it. You know what I'm saying? Open your eyes, again, is an idiom to be awake, produce, right? Or you will be satisfied with food. So Koheleth is using this term here to describe one's character. If you're lazy, you are asleep. Verse 24, Proverbs 24, verses 30 to 34, he just basically repeats what he wrote in chapter 6. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then your poverty will come as a robber, and your want like an armed man, right? So I'm convinced, based upon just the nature of how Koheleth is writing here, in chapter 8, we can go back to Ecclesiastes 8, I don't think that he's talking about physical sleep, because he mentions sleep in a beneficial way in the previous chapter, the previous chapters of Ecclesiastes that we looked at. Koheleth could be suggesting that no one should not get any sleep, since again he acknowledges when one sleeps in the previous statement, physical rest. But he may be using it to underscore a person ought not to have a lackadaisical character about them. What has been the whole point of this writing? That we ought to live intentionally, right? That we ought not to waste our life. That we ought to look at our activities as something that is important, to labor well. And if you don't labor well, you are asleep. And I am asleep. We ought to be involved in the tasks of humanity and to be intentional about them. Verse 17. Let's continue. And I saw every work of God and concluded that men cannot discover the work which God has been done under the sun. Even though a man should seek laboriously, he will not discover. And though the wise man should say, I know, he cannot discover. What does this mean here? What does it mean that he saw every work of God and concluded that man cannot discover the work which has been done under the sun? Well, Koheleth again mentions once more that he saw and examined every activity of God for humanity. Okay? Again, he's pretty wealthy. He's got the time. He's a king, right? He observes this and writing it down for the congregation of Israel and for us who are reading it to know. His analysis is that humanity cannot find or discover what has been done under the sun. Once more, Koheleth it's not that this is not new. He has said this before in a previous chapter. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11, he underscores this as well. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart or in their mind, so that humanity will not find out the work which God has done from beginning to end. Well, I had mentioned before, this is God's work. We have it right here. We know what the end's like. We know what happens, right? He wins, therefore those who fear him win, the end, right? So what is Koheleth getting at? If we know God's will here, then what is Koheleth talking about? The point is not the fact that we know God's will here in terms of the scriptures or in terms of wisdom, overall God's activity. What he's talking about is one's personal life. I mentioned before, we know what we're doing right now. We're all here. We don't know what we'll be doing a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. We have not a clue. The point Koheleth makes is all about knowing one's personal life and activities from beginning to end. We do not know what event we will be in next year. We don't even know if we'll be alive tomorrow. That human beings on a personal level do not know where they will be a week from now, months from now, or even years from now. Human beings make activities, we plan them, but we can never be absolutely certain of them. Even the wise man, the one who has wisdom, I believe that we are all insightful ones, we are wise ones because we have God's word. Even we cannot discover what we'll be doing, what event we will have, what will occur a year from now. We cannot, because he mentions this. Koheleth expands on this point that even though human beings will attempt to try and crack the code, we'll try and figure out, we'll try and plan our life. Well, if we move here, we'll do this, and we'll move here and we'll spin that, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do that, and then we'll try and crack the code. They will seek it diligently, but will not discover or find it. You can never be certain about tomorrow, ever. Koheleth even mentions that those who are wise say that they know how to find it, but even they can't discover. They should say that. Well, I know, but they don't even know. So I guess it's best not to be certain. Remember in James, I mentioned this before, James chapter 4, verses 13 to 16. James mentions this in his text. He says this, come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we'll go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Oh, you sound oh so sure. Yet you do not know what your life will be like mañana. You have no clue. You're just a vapor that appears for a little while and vanishes. Sounds like James has been reading Koheleth. Instead, you ought to say, If the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Now, it's not the words themselves that are the issue. James is talking about outlook, perspective. To speak with such certainty in such earthly activities and events that occur emphasizes the person's improper focus, because it presupposes that this person who says this is certain of the future when they're not. They don't have that information available to them. They may want to do that, but it's not certain that they will, which is why James refers to this as boastfulness or arrogance in terms of their outlook. This is the end of chapter 8. Now, tying all of this together, because there are several points that Koheleth makes throughout this discourse. So let's tie this all together. Koheleth is not suggesting that a person should not make personal plans. We all will make them. That's unescapable and avoidable. Hey, I'm going to Branson in a week and a half. Okay? We've already planned that. But I cannot be certain that I'll make it there, because anything could happen between now and a week from now. So I have to make my plans, but hold them like this. Koheleth may be suggesting that one ought not to expect that their life will go a certain way. You know, we all make thoughts like that, expectations that we have, that we think our life is going to go a certain trajectory. And then when it doesn't, we get disappointed. We get angry at God as if it's his fault, right? Koheleth says you shouldn't do that. Don't expect your life to go a certain way. Just live your life and live it intentionally. Koheleth's words prevent those who read and consider it not to have a false expectation about the trajectory of their own life. Again, Koheleth mentions that even a wise person cannot see all ends. You should know, if you know the movie reference, let me know, of their personal life. Koheleth mentioned that even though this person's personal information is not open to us, God's wisdom does give us on what to focus on. So even though we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, guess what? We have the information to live for today, because that's what God gives us. How to make wise choices today. Koheleth mentioned one ought to focus on eating, drinking, and their overall satisfaction of life and activities, because these are the gifts, or the gift of God, really. Koheleth mentioned that God's wisdom gives us the information necessary to have the proper focus and attitude within the activities we complete. So it's not just the activities that we complete, but it is the motivation and the intentionality that God also gives us when we complete them. That's super cool. Koheleth stated, from this perspective, it seems like the righteous are mistreated and crushed by those who are wicked, and it seems like all is lost if we're looking at it from an improper perspective. But Koheleth also mentioned that even when the righteous are forgotten by the activities of the wicked, it is qualitatively better for the righteous, because they fear God. We have the wisdom to know how to conduct ourselves in our daily activities. We have the wisdom and the motivation of how we ought to conduct ourselves. And We know the future because God has given it to us. We have everything to conduct ourselves under the sun. What an amazing chapter. Chapter 9, I know that the conclusion ends in chapter 12. I believe that the conclusion begins in chapter 9. We will examine that in a couple weeks, right? Let's go ahead and pray, and we will close out this lesson. Lord, thank you so much. I am so grateful for Kohalef's observations. He has examined things wisely and has given it to us straight. And this is an encouragement to us. This is not a sad thing. He has given us the information necessary to make wise choices and proper motivation in our activities, not to focus on our expectations that we put on ourselves, but on the ones that you have for us, because it grounds us and keeps us focused and centered on things that matter. May we continue to do that all of our days, for it's in your Son's name. Amen.